So we are here and we're going to do our live question and answer session with Amanda Thompson, who has been helping us for the last 5 webinar episodes on the topic of potty training. And I have a huge list of questions when we sent out a feeler before we started the potty training webinar. And so I am going to, until we get some questions on the screen, I'll start with those. And I have a couple of comments. They can see it on their phone, but not on their computer. That one might be, I don't know how to fix that one. But we will, Allison might have an idea on that one. I don't know. We'll start now. So Amanda, you walked us through kind of the different stages of preparing for potty training and then kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of potty training. So can you do just a real quick
like overview
of the different steps in preparing, and then kind of as we have more questions with people coming on, hopefully
and interrupt me as I'm going as well, because there might be more details that I say now that I may have missed during then, because sometimes I just start talking and I go off on a tangent. The biggest thing early on is trying to figure out if your child is ready. And there's a point where, you know, a typically developing child will be ready between 3 and 5, but those of us that are having children that might have a little extra help or lack of communication barriers, it's going to put a little bit more struggle and a little more work on mom and dad or whoever's taking care of the child. The biggest thing is if there's an age where it's not socially acceptable anymore to not be potty trained. For example, you know, an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old high schooler, we want to make sure that it's now our decision to make that decision to potty train. So if they're younger, it might take a little bit more communication work, but as they're older, we should be working with all disciplines of therapy, behavioral therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists on different ideas. So if your child is mostly in a school-based system, then getting that to be on your ARD meeting. And if this wants to be in your ARD meeting in January, whenever you meet, or if it's an end of school, you know, hey, this is what we're going to work on over the summer. We're really going to work on it over the summer. If we can put this in our goals for the fall, for the school-age kids, I think it's really, really important to have all people on board and all people willing to help. So getting ready, we want to make sure that our child's getting plenty of fiber, but obviously not too much. That's going to be, a diet is going to be a huge component when it comes to potty training, especially constipation. Adults and children alike, if you have any leaking, daytime, nighttime, or just generalized incontinence, coughing, sneezing, the first indication is to eliminate all constipation issues. And so by addressing the constipation, you can start addressing the bladder training. The long version of the potty training, well, for all versions of potty training and bowel or bladder, is to document. You want to just document what are they doing on a normal day-to-day basis. It's easier going to be during home, not at school, obviously, because you're not there unless you have some really good school system that's going to help you track what's normal for them. And if you find out that they're not even peeing at school, that's an issue. That's going to cause a lot of issues if they're dry the whole time or if they're soaked the whole time. So are they dribblers? You have to get a baseline. And that's why the webinar was very, very general, because every child's different. So if you can get your baseline, then let's say the child, you want to take if you can get really mathematical and take an average time of how often they're peeing. But I usually start with no more than an hour and a half. So at the very beginning, every hour and a half, try to sit on the potty at the max amount. But early on, you want to spend some time sitting on the potty, making sure that they are communicating with you, that you're communicating with them, and that's really the summary. Bowel training will work with bladder training once they can figure out what muscles are being activated to be able to train. But the biggest thing is preparing mom and dad to be mentally and physically prepared for it, because it's a lot of hard work. And so everybody needs to be rewarded. It's not something that just clicks for some kids. And so you really have to work on rewarding yourself and then coming up with different rewards for the children. Some of these questions. So an ARD meeting is like an AEP. Typically the kids are meeting with the school system and coming up with goals that are school-based, whether it's therapy involvement. Any kid with a 501c or any kid with any diagnosis that's getting any kind of assistance at school is going to have an IEP. And the ARD meeting is literally just the whole group of people meeting, including the parents. And after 14, the kids are allowed to start coming in and being a part of that meeting. My niece is 18 and she attends hers because they want to know what her goals are. So for sure. And getting the schools involved is going to be key. Best recommendation for fiber. It says we've tried fiber, vitamins, fruit, veggies, and no relief. Well, that might be because they are having too much fiber. So adding a lot of fiber, if you are adding a lot of fiber and you're not staying hydrated. So hydration is going to be, they need to be drinking half their body weight in ounces of fluid per day. That's not irritating, and that's not including any kind of activity or jumping or running, anything like that. So if someone weighs 100 pounds, they need to drink 50 ounces of fluid. And if they weigh 200 pounds, they need to drink 100 ounces of fluid. Obviously, that's not going to be for most of our kids, but if you think about a 200-pound person and a 100-pound person, they need different amounts of fluid to stay hydrated. And so dehydrating fluids are going to be not great. So your sodas, anything with caffeine in it, is going to be dehydrating. Caffeine-based chocolate is going to be dehydrating. Anything with artificial sweeteners is going to be dehydrating. And then obviously adding too much fiber is going to be irritating. So I always tell people to kind of start from scratch and eliminate all their fiber. I talked about in one of the webinars an infant massage, a bowel infant massage. So if you just go on YouTube and just type in infant massage for gas, it's on a newborn baby, but you can literally do it on anybody. It's just harder to do it on an older child. You just have to kind of move your hands around. So fruits and veggies, anything with, if you want to add fiber, for sure, anything with skins on it. So potato skins, apple skins, pear skins are going to be really good. Pinterest has some really good fiber and protein recipes. One of my favorite is the energy balls. Sometimes they're called protein balls, but literally they're just oats, like dried oats, oatmeal, flaxseed, honey, chocolate chips, and I think that's it. And you can literally add whatever other nuts that you want. And it depends on the kid and what they're allergic to, or any kind of allergies are going to play a huge part in that. So fiber, make sure that they're not having too much fiber, enough fluid. And then anything with skins on it is going to be really good fiber. Bananas are going to actually constipate you more. So if you're eating bananas to increase fiber and protein, you're probably going to end up constipating. So maybe even back off the fiber and say, okay, let's start over and let's just work on getting in fruits and veggies and get everything moving. But the infant massage and fluids is going to be really key on getting those bowels to move. And then the squatty potty position, when I taught everybody how to poop, and we can go over that too. Scared to sit on the potty. How do I? So scared of the potty is going to be a huge, especially on age. Even the older kids, some of them are really terrified to sit on the potty. So sometimes I'll tell people to get like a chair potty. Even though I said in the readiness to not get a chair potty, just get a potty, get them to sit on it while you're going to the bathroom so they're not terrified of it. And then getting them to be, it's going to be a whole process to even get them to the bathroom on the toilet. And so maybe by putting a little potty seat next to you, every time you go pee, they go pee or they sit on the potty. And the boy or girl, if you want to, it's easier to train the boys while they're sitting as well. So getting them to associate good behavior with potty, because if they are terrified of the potty, all they're going to do is clench their muscles and they're never going to really wanting to sit on the potty. So try that. And then talking with depending on the age too, any behavioral things that you can work on as far as reward system and encouraging, like depending on their communication too. You could reward, or you could encourage them in some way to just sit on the potty, just get them used to. Ignore the whole potty training part for right now and just get them to go to the bathroom without fighting you and sit on the potty without fighting you with their clothes on, then work their way into working with their clothes off is going to be key. And then if there's still some behavioral issues, it's always going to be, I mean, I'm always available as far as like specific questions if you tried everything, but your behavioral therapist, occupational therapist, all your therapists are going to be really good that, because they've also probably tried to figure out a way to get them happy in an environment that they're typically not happy with, especially like speech therapists are great about, they have to sit still and sometimes they have to sit in a specific spot. Occupational therapy does too. So they've already figured out what those rewards are to get them to participate in their task. And so if we can create that same process in the bathroom, no potty training going on, just literally getting them happy going to the bathroom without arguing with you or fighting you. And again, it depends on age too and their communication. So finding your signs, bathroom, B circles, T for toilet. And then you could use, I love doing the Velcro pictures. The speech therapists use it all the time, but you could hand it to them and use it for communication. But trying to figure out that pre-potty training is going to be good. Hopefully that answers your question.
Do you see the question, thinking of potty training my SAS girl at the same time as my other daughter, is that asking for a headache, or would there be a benefit to that?
I think if you have the teamwork and if you have a support system, I think it would be really good, depending on their ages. Let me see. And it might be beneficial depending on their ages. If the younger one, if it's a typically developing child, they may pick up on it. Even if they're older, they may pick up on it. And especially if they want to follow sister, if they are typically doing what another sibling is doing, it's harder actually whenever there's no siblings, because if they see you and they see that process happening with potty training, it might be beneficial to try it. But key is having your support system. So if you don't have a whole lot of support system, it'll be difficult. And then what you could do is try it and then give yourself some time, give yourself some grace and say, okay, I'm going to give it 1 month or 1 week and see where we're at in 1 week. And if we are just struggle busing, then I'm not even going to give myself a little bit more time. And sometimes we as parents need a little bit of a break because it's so exhausting that we might not be successful and then we get hurt about it. So give yourself some grace. I would try it, especially if the other one's a typically developing child, and especially if siblings, if they're close enough in age, especially, they always want to do what the other one's doing, and it might be beneficial. It's hard to say specifics, but I would try it and then just give yourself some grace for sure.
Potty parties. That's what that sounds like.
For sure. And I would think you would need to have two, maybe the older one sitting on the potty with a potty seat and the other one sitting on like a potty chair next to them. And I would maybe make it even like a reward system while they're sitting there, and they'll be able to communicate. I think there could be a lot of benefits to it, and it wouldn't be, but there can also be a lot of challenges as well, because you're going to be trying to get two kids that might be having an accident in the living room into the bathroom. But if you try the whole, trying to get them to sit on the potty for a period of time, trying to track their pee, and even try to get them on the same potty schedule, that's going to be key. If you can say, okay, screw their baselines, I'm going to start with every 30 minutes. We're going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to, have hydration and stuff like that. So we're going to see where the kids are at for that.
That sounds like a great.
Trying to be helpful and read these questions.
Oh yeah. I know there's the one with having the older kids that will stay on the potty longer, like how to get tricks for keeping older kids on the potty longer. And I know we had that question earlier too. She says her daughter pats her thigh with her palm when she needs to go potty.
That's beautiful. And every kid's different, and you're going to have to, and sometimes you might even pick up on their trigger or their communication that is going to be key. Was there a question about how long?
How to get them to stay? And because for me, my daughter wouldn't want to stay on the potty until it was like one time I knew how badly she needed to go. And I don't know, this is probably not good advice, but it was like, it got to the point where I kind of sat and held her on the potty, and all it took was her releasing one time and getting the cell. And then she was like, oh, that was not as horrific as I thought it was going to be. Yeah. And then it was like, she needed that. So how do you get them to stay sitting? And I know you had said engaging other, like the occupational therapists and others, any other for an older kid that might be?
So it depends on what their task is that they like to do. For example, I have had parents do iPads on the toilet, and for however long they want it to be. So if they want their child to sit on the toilet for 10 minutes, then they set a timer for the 10-minute on the iPad. But the trick is, you can't have an epic meltdown when you take it away. It's got to be something that they can realize they have an end to. The other thing is it can't be their reward for potting on the potty. So if their reward for your celebration is to watch the iPad for 2 minutes, then it's going to be totally pointless and counterintuitive. The other thing is you have to be tricky with the iPad, because if they're a gamer and they're, especially the older kids that are watching, some of the games on the iPads are crazy, but if they're tense and if they're like really into it, that's pointless too. They're not going to be relaxing. But I like the holding on the potty. The younger ones, semi-younger, they're scared to sit and relax. So sometimes if you just kind of let them sit and then kind of get at their level and kind of hug them and get them to relax, rub their back, rub their thighs, making sure their feet are elevated, feet are supported. That's another thing for that child that's scared of the toilet. Make sure their feet are touching, and their bottom's not going to fall through the toilet. Now I've lost track of the question. What was the question?
I think that I'll see if Rhonda comes back and says, has any more questions.
Sitting long, how long? Yeah. So it depends on the child. So the other thing is you want to bring activities they can do, whether it's puzzles on the iPad, regular puzzles, sitting on the toilet doing arts and crafts, literally everything you might need to keep them occupied, put it in the bathroom. So fine motor stuff. I like one of my favorite ones is the pipe cleaners with the Cheerios, just something that's going to keep their attention. You want to have multiple things in the bathroom with you. If you're okay with them eating on the toilet, whatever's going to keep them content and kind of relaxed. They have to have their feet supported, and their bottom can't fall through the hole. Otherwise, they're not going to pee or poop. But anything you can think of that they like or entertain with, but that can't be their reward for peeing. It has to be something completely different.
Okay. And I know you had talked a little bit before, but some of the questions, so a lot of our kids are nonverbal or pre-verbal. So the signs of readiness, what do they physically have to be able to do to say, okay, this child has a good chance of making it? And is there a point where you would say for any child, I just don't think that this is worth pursuing yet or now?
Yeah, so the only thing that I would say that the kid needs to be able to do is to sit independently. So if they can sit independently, then they are ready to potty train. As far as not ready, because kids can sit at any age, but they can sit independently, they can be potty trained. If they can take on and off their pants, that's good, but it's not absolutely necessary. That's going to be key with some of the OT stuff. I like pants that slip on and slip off, so we don't have to worry about finagling buttons. Communication, that's tricky because some of the nonverbal kids still communicate in some way, shape, or form. And so whether it's signing or no signing, or how do you know that they're mad or sad besides screaming? But all kids are going to have most kids are going to have some sort of communication, whether it's some of my kids, I like the tapping with her thumb. I had one kid that his only communication was the Velcro pictures, and he had no communication, but he at one point would just grab it and go to the bathroom and not do anything else. But that took a lot of work, and it was a picture, and you can't delay the picture and the bathroom. It has to be direct picture bathroom so that there's a connection. But I would say all kids have the capability to potty train. It just might take longer with the kids that are older and that have less communication abilities. But all kids have the capability to have some training. So it might not be fast, and it might not be, they might still have some accidents, but it won't be complete the only kids that cannot potty train, which even then I still can potty train them in a way because they have to as adults, are children with like spina bifida or spinal cord injury. But even those kids have to be potty trained at some point, meaning they know when they're wet or have a bowel movement, they have learned to smell it. Any kind of mental challenges is going to be difficult, but it just kind of depends on the kid and that communication and what your communication is. I'm a big fan of the kiddo that taps her thumb on her thigh saying, I need a potty, like, let's roll. But signing, even just like walking, I say if they're independent walker, that's obviously key. Independent walker, they have to be able to sit comfortably on the toilet, and some sort of communication. It does not have to be verbal. It doesn't even have to be a sign. It could be a picture pointing, They have a Dynavox for communication. If they have, I'm trying to think of some other ideas off the top of my head. Even like holding themselves, like you can teach them like this bathroom. So I think if anybody has some ideas, shout them out especially on communication would be great.
Now, what if someone tries a certain approach and it just isn't working? Like, do you continue with a given approach? When do you say, okay, we need to change course and maybe try a different way? And also, do they need a reset in between trying different methods? Like, do you need to give it a week or 3 days or?
Right. So I would give it at least 2 to 3 weeks on the longer method. And then you have to think back to there's got to be something missing. So am I missing constipation that I didn't realize was an issue? Am I giving them too little fluid or too much fluid? It's a lot of work. And so I would say if you change methods, I would take a break for my sanity, not really for the kids. The kids don't really need it. It's going to be you. It is exhausting. And you got to give yourself some grace. It can take months, but you should start seeing some sort of success within the first 2 to 3 weeks, even if it's a little bit, even if it's one successful potty. They won't be able to say, I need a potty, or sign potty or bathroom for quite a while. It's more so you're successful if you can meet from no accidents. So if I can go 30 minutes without having an accident for a week, and then I bump it to 45 minutes, and then I bump it to 55 minutes, and then I bump it to an hour, and then you'll find a spot in there where you're kind of your happy medium. And the trick isn't that they communicate that they need to go to the bathroom. You could be riding the train of successful mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, taking them at a scheduled interval for a while. And so it's kind of, and I'd say success is a non-accident, a non-changing clothes accident. And so give yourself a little bit of grace and say, yeah, my little one's about to Nana, baby. About to come in the picture. But I would give yourself a little bit of grace for that. Can you say hi? For anybody that is watching, I'm in Tennessee visiting my parents from Texas. And so my mom is eating up the ability to watch my kids.
It's a love on baby.
Yes. And it's very cold here. Anybody in Tennessee, it snowed all day yesterday.
Oh my, that's a fun thing.
Yeah.
We did have another,
And I lost my question.
How long should they sit on the toilet? If you're doing remind us on the longer method, how long you're doing the sit on the potty?
You know, I would do 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And I really wouldn't push longer than that, because ideally you are literally hitting them at the intervals that that they need to pee. And if they don't pee, I wouldn't give them a whole lot of break. I would go back. I would give them 10 or 15 minutes of a break and then come back, because they're probably going to have an accident while you're walking around. So like, let's say my interval is 1 hour. Let's say I took my baseline of pee times and they average out every hour that they need to pee. Well, every hour before my hour, so probably 10 or 15 minutes before my hour mark, I'm going to go sit on the potty. I'm going to sit on the potty for 10 or 15 minutes, because I know I've hit before the interval, but I know they need to pee. And then they don't go. So then you want to not start over your interval because they didn't pee. I'd give it a 10 or 15 minute break, or even at the beginning, I'd give it like a 2 to 5 minute break, because as soon as they get up and walk around, they're probably going to need to pee again. So then take them back to the potty for 5 or 10 minutes, and likely they'll start peeing. Start realizing that that's kind of the key. And then if they pee, then you want to track the next hour. So every hour on the hour is your interval. Let's say it's every 2 hours, which is a long time early on. So I wouldn't start with 2 hours. Let's say the interval's 2 hours. Well, I'd go sit on the potty about 5 or 10 minutes before that 2 hour interval, because likely you're going to hit them before that. If you really want to push it, and if you want to add fluid, you just have to be careful, because if the more fluids you add, the likelihood they're going to have more accidents. So I would even do more frequent urination. I do this with adults too. So it's not any different than retraining an adult bladder. So an adult bladder, you want to pee before your prescribed interval. And so if you wait until they need to go, likely they've already maxed out the bladder capability. And you have to think too, the bladder is a muscle. And so we're trying to coordinate. It's a nerve, motor, muscle coordination situation. And so if we fill up the bladder's never completely empty, and it's like a balloon that stretches out. And so most of the time, if you have a typically developing child or around other kids, like a 3 to 5 year old, their bladder gets full and they're like, I'm playing, I'm too busy to pee. And then they fill it up more and they're like, I'm good, I'm gonna hold it. Then they start potty dancing and really potty dancing. And you're like, I know you need to go. And they're like, I don't really need to go. They've hit their almost max capacity. Some of those accidents are actually overflow incontinence accidents. They've maxed out their capability of even urine holding. And so by the time they pee, that it's overflowed. So they kind of pee or dribble on their way to the bathroom. That's overflow incontinence. And so the idea is to hit them early on before their bladder is even super full. The trick is if you don't extend that time, then you have the opposite effect, and you end up developing urge incontinence, where they feel like they need to pee every 5 seconds, even though they don't have to actually do that. And so every week that you are successful with no accidents, and a successful week with no accidents, you can increase that interval by about 10 to 15 minutes until you've reached your golden window. For kids, it's about 2.5 to 3 hours. You don't really want them to pee to wait longer than that. And if they do, they'll probably end up with overflow incontinence.
Okay.
Did that answer questions? I have no idea if I even answered questions.
Nope, you did. That was great. So another question that we have is the setting of your potty training. Is it best to try potty training at home? But she says they're considering a 4-day getaway where they can focus on their boys and potty training in a different environment. What do you think about that? Is there a benefit to being at home versus getting
Well,
away?
if you're gonna do the short version, I wouldn't make it on or any version. I wouldn't do it on a vacation. That's personally. And I would actually wait to do it. So my um I have some families right now that they're like, man, I'm just gonna like they're coming to see me, but more virtually because I'm doing some virtual consultations because they're really not gonna follow through completely until after even the new year. It depends on how much work you want to do on a vacation or a new environment. Typically, kids are actually going to do better at home than they will in another environment. School is another good place to do it as long as you have all people on board. And sometimes if they don't have an aide with them all the time, it's going to be really challenging. But home, even taking a week off of work, if you're a teacher doing it in the middle of the summer, you almost have to prepare yourself for several weeks ahead of time in order to prepare for it. So it's not something that you can just like do on a whim. Or me, I wouldn't, especially if you're struggling. If you've never tried it before, you could try it. I think it would be, it might be discouraging to do it on a getaway if you're not successful. But then I worry about the travel back. So depending on if it's a long drive, you don't want to be driving 4 hours in a car with a freshly trained potty trainer. That's never fun.
For sure. Yeah. Uh, so I guess that's mostly a personal preference.
Yeah,
If
definitely a
you're
personal preference.
seeing it as maybe a getaway, but that's close enough by that you could do in your window to get home, that might be.
Right. And depending on the age of the kids as well. So even some adults don't like to poop in public or poop when they go on vacation. Plane rides mess people up, car rides mess people up. And so you need to kind of figure out between you and your spouse and your kids, is this something that's, and it depending on how far away it is, it's just an hour down the, hour or down maybe 3 hours to Fredericksburg or like a B&B or something like that. It's solely dependent on that, but I would also take into consideration traveling and how you eat different. But if you're solely going to potty train, may as well try it. Just be cautious on the drive back and the drive there. You want to keep the same intervals, and I would be careful because I typically say no pull-ups or anything while you're doing the really intense versions of all of these, or even the long version, no underwear because they can't tell whether they're wet or not. Or no pull-ups, just underwear. And so you don't want that in your car seats on the way home.
That's true. Well, and that's a good segue into the next question about big kid underwear. And it was something that I was actually wondering during the webinar when you had said no pull-ups whatsoever. Is that in the period that you're trying, or is that no pull-ups ever again once you start trying to potty train? What is the pull-ups?
So I'd say each person is individual. Technically, it's gonna say the like textbooks and all the stuff I've learned is like no pull-ups ever again. But nighttime is key. That's gonna be a completely different ball game. You don't want them to not pee all day and then have an accident. That's guaranteed. And then traveling is always gonna be different because when you travel, you don't eat the same, you don't drink the same. Nothing is the same unless they're like really, really, really trained. They're not gonna be a good. We all pee different traveling, and so it's gonna be completely different. But I would say if you're really full force traveling, or not traveling, if you're full force potty training, I would use no pull-ups at all. If you know that you need, it's kind of counterproductive if you know you need to run to the store, but it's gonna fall in the interval. It might be good to pee right before you leave, and then it's dependent because I know for me personally, like I would put a pull-up on my kid before I went to the store. But my poor children haven't been to the store since COVID. So
Yeah.
found Instacart. I'm super excited about Instacart.
And this is a good question, actually. Have you seen kiddos holding their pee longer when they're potty training versus when you do your initial kind of evaluation of their urinary frequency, like how often they're peeing. Because I ran into this with my son. I have a typically developing older son, and he would just refuse, like for a while, refuse. And so what is that, and how do you overcome if they do need to pee every hour, but they just won't?
So eventually they're going to get overflow incontinence. So eventually they're going to overflow and pee. And so it's going to take a couple days and a lot of frustration. I think my son is the same way. He's typically developing, he's 5. And at school, he might pee once or twice, maybe. And so dealing with nighttime issues is going to be a problem. And he's a typically developing child. So it's a struggle bus for all. But eventually they'll get overflow incontinence. And I think reiterating not the scolding, like of the bad, like you're wet, or, you know, being, especially if a nonverbal, they're going to see your face they're going to see your face, they're going to acknowledge your body language. And so if you are more solemn about the accidents eventually and be more ecstatic about peeing in the potty, that's going to be where you're going to be more successful. But eventually they're going to overflow. And so the bladder is a muscle. It's not going to explode, but it might turn into nighttime bedwetting for a little while until they figure out to pull up on them, or a diaper, one of those thick diapers for bed. And then depending on the age of the child, it might be different for that. And it might be, okay, let's reevaluate. What is it? Fear? Is it fear of sitting on the potty? Is it comfort? They're not comfortable sitting on the potty. It's not occupied. Maybe they don't like to pee at public in school. Maybe if we just eliminate all public bathrooms for now and focus on home and getting that connection of relaxation, getting the knees above the hips, and if it's a boy or a girl, making sure boys, especially the younger ones, it's so much easier to train them sitting than to start standing, because it's really hard to figure out those muscles. And just standing. So if you really want to get into details about how men can stand up and pee, they actually lean back a little bit on what's called their Y ligaments on their pelvis. And so older men have a lot more trouble with urinary leaking and incontinence because they're bent forward. So if you have a child that has really bad posture, gaming, scoliosis, so there could be like 2 ends of the spectrum, they're going to have more difficulty, and lack of flexibility of the pelvis, they're actually going to have more difficulty learning to stand to pee than when they're younger. And so thinking about that, so if you have an older child that you're like, I want them standing to potty, maybe we need to backtrack and sit, because it's going to be easier to relax sitting, and then figuring out those muscles, and then they can do it standing.
Okay. We have a family that's newly diagnosed, and so just first of all, want to say welcome to the group and to the family. And they have an older 15-year-old who's 6 feet 4 inches tall.
That's a big boy.
And they're saying that they've tried lots of different methods over the years, and I guess it sounds like maybe battling some guilt, not still trying. Which my heart goes out to that. I can can imagine, but he doesn't seem to have any clue when he's going to the bathroom, and also very active and hard to get to sit. So is there a time where you just say, we're just,
done? It depends. I'd like to talk to that mom. I want to know what the communication is with the kiddo. I always say summertime, and depending on where you live, is going to be good to acknowledge it, because it might be, depending on where you live, and summertime, we could even work on some outside stuff. That's a big boy too, so comfort on the potty is definitely not a problem for him. But constipation might be, and awareness, but depending on the communication, and how they're doing it at school. So if anybody is going to follow through at school, is going to be really challenging. I wouldn't feel guilty. A lot of parents give up. It's so hard. It's so hard. And so I feel like there can be a point where you can reach out to professionals. So I deal with a lot of older kids. So I typically, as a PT, I don't have a lot of young kids, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have them for bedwetting. But my children that I help the parents with potty training typically are teenagers or older, because there's a lot more one-on-one problems that might, not problems, but issues that we can resolve together that's going to be more specific for you. So communication, definitely awareness, and in awareness, does he not have any awareness of his bowel movements as well? Then I would see, has he ever had any spinal cord issues, or does he not have any sensation there? Has he developed overflow incontinence over the many years? That's always a possibility. I'll tell you, my worst patients are my adult nurses and teachers, because their whole lives they've done nothing but hold their pee for extended amounts of time. And so after a really long time, not for him, but after, if this continues, then that bladder, the nerves around the bladder that send the signals to my brain that say I need to pee, they actually lose that ability. And so they forever have to be on a schedule. But it's my nurses and my teachers I treat them as 60 and 70-year-old women that have horrible overflow incontinence because they literally have no sensation to pee. There are some bladder mobilizations that I'll teach parents to do that will kind of stimulate the bladder, figuring out, if he can have bladder irritants, what are his allergies. I'd like to know more about him. I like to know more about like why he doesn't have sensation. Is it communication? Is it cognition? But I would love to talk to mom. Tell her to private message me.
Well, and I know that you and I had talked before about making your information available, and that you were so generously willing to do a one-on-one consult with any of our families that might have very specific questions or might not be comfortable talking in a big group about what they're doing, that you very generously and kindly have been said that you would be willing to talk with people. So I will make sure that your information gets out to our families as well, to kind of have that opportunity if they need it. And so maybe that kind of rolls into this next question of earlier training versus older training, like is, and are we looking at
The
you
window,
might even with
window
kids
of opportunity,
right? When is your window with a child? And my child, so you kind of know how with some of the intellectual disability and the verbal challenges that our kids have, is waiting a little later sometimes better?
So yeah, I'd say waiting later than a typically developing child, because typically developing children are going to be fully daytime potty trained between 3 and 5, typically before kindergarten. And then nighttime is about 1 to 2 years after daytime. And so so you have to give yourself a little bit of grace. If it's a 8-year-old potty training and they're still, just now training, don't stress about the nighttime until a year to 2 years later. So my happy age is anywhere between 5 and 8. Is a really good age to hit. But again, it depends on that kid and their school environment, their home environment, if they have siblings. And so it really, at any age, can be very difficult and very challenging, but it can also be really rewarding. Purely the 8 to 10-year-old max range, because you start getting into social interactions when they hit middle school, and it's getting younger and younger now, even 4th and 5th graders. And so although they might have other special needs that they are going to be in like a different classroom, you still want them to be viewed in society as your baby and your child. And you don't want other people to have one more thing that they're worried about. And so I always tell parents that it's never too late, but it is a lot of effort, especially once they're older. But don't give yourself some grace and don't. I feel guilty when I say, "Oh, 5 to 8's great," and parents are like, "Oh, my kid's 12. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I waited this long." It's exhausting and it's frustrating. And so I'd say I like to hit them before middle school, purely because of the social interactions with middle school, and middle school is awkward for everybody. And so I like to hit them before then. But even if it's afterwards, if they're going to be in some kind of day program whenever they're older, or if you're able to care for them when they're older, if their cognitive abilities allow them to have some sort of job, you want them to be able to care for themselves, and that includes hygiene as well. And so if they're able to follow commands to wash their hands or eat food, if they can, if you've taught them to eat, they can definitely potty train. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It is. It certainly was for us a huge undertaking that I was confident we weren't going to succeed in for well over a week. And so I feel for every family that is walking through that very strongly. And I guess maybe one or two more questions before we go. But so going back to the question of the bladder holding longer when they are trying to potty train. It sounds like maybe one environment at grandma's house that they are holding, they do better at home potentially. What if the child is having accidents at school versus at home, or at grandma's house versus at home? Do you have a way to kind of even that out for them?
Yeah. So here's the trick. So the question I pose is age. So age and communication. Most kids are terrified to pee anywhere else except at home. And so if they're freshly trained potty trainers, so even like less than a year, I would expect those accidents, and they just hold it. The trick is you don't want to ask them, do you need to pee? You don't want to say bathroom or toilet. It's let's go to the bathroom, and we're going to try to potty before we go. And the more you're communicating with them, whether it's a verbal communication, a signing, the trick is if they're going to fight you with it. So starting out with the routine, depending on how cognitive they are to listen to you, maybe talking about it at grandma's house or talking about it on your way to grandma's house. The watches are great if your kiddo is, the watches that have alarms on them. My computer's about to die, so I'm going to plug it in. The watches, timers. So if you have timers that they can see, that they can hear, you can always make sure that they are, nope, it's not in there. I don't know what to do with that. Make sure that they are hitting that timer on key. School's a different ball game. School is very difficult because schools, they tend to not be as diligent about it, and so they're not going to be, it depends. I mean, every kid, I'm trying to find my computer charger. I'm sorry, guys. Every kid is going to be different at their school, and so if you do not have the ability, if the school does not have the ability to have that kid with an aid, I would actually try to force it. Try to force them to have an aid. And if they are in a typically, if they're in a mainstream program, then that's going to be tricky too, because they're going to.
Uh-oh, I think we might have lost her. Oh, there she is. No. We lost her. So unless we get her back on again, I will just go ahead and wrap up. This is probably a good point to finish. I will be getting Amanda's contact information. She does amazing consults, telehealth consults for free for families all the time. And she would absolutely love to talk with you, meet with you, and help kind of brainstorm for a one-on-one plan if you would need it. Potty training is an adventure, and it's difficult for sure. And so I'm sure there will be lots of discussion on the boards as time goes by. But thank you all for joining us today for this question and answer session. And thank you especially to Amanda for her 5-part webinar series that she's done for us. It is available on the YouTube channel as well. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you for all of the fabulous contributions to Giving Tuesday. We're so thankful for our foundation, and we hope everyone does well this evening. Thank y'all.